Our seminarians, as you know, come from a wide array of backgrounds and professions. Some are lawyers, some are doctors, some are accountants, engineers, administrators, plumbers, mechanics, public servants. Every year, we ask one of those seminarians to address this group. This year, it's always hard to pick somebody because every guy here has a wonderful story to share, and you would be inspired to hear them. But in the interest of time, we're limiting it to one. Ironically, this guy was a paramedic, a fireman, in deference to Archbishop Henning, whose father was a fireman, a fire chief, and a father. As you're going to soon find out as you listen to him, he comes from a place called Texas, particularly Beaumont. It's a small diocese, but it's a wonderful place. And he's a wonderful example of the men in this house. It is a great joy to present to you tonight Deacon Paul Landi from the Diocese of Beaumont.
Good evening, and thank you all for being here tonight and allowing me to speak a little bit about myself and the journey that has led me here to Pope St. John XXIII National Seminary. I grew up in a small town, Navasota, Texas, just south of College Station. You might know it as the world-famous Texas A&M Aggies. I have 4 siblings, 1 older brother, 2 older sisters, and 1 younger sister. I was married in 1997, divorced in 2015. I have 1 son, his name is Josh. He's 26 years old, and he owns his own taxidermy business. I have 2 stepdaughters. The oldest one is Megan. She's 33. She's been married for 4 years. She has a 2-year-old daughter. So in Texas, I'm referred to as a proud pawpaw. My youngest stepdaughter is Madison. She's 27, and she's a 2nd grade school teacher. All my life, I grew up wanting to be a fireman. Since I was a young boy, around 7 or 8 years old, we had a kitchen fire at our house. It was a very minor kitchen fire, but the firemen ran inside with their hoses. They efficiently and quickly extinguished the fire. And of course, that led me to be curious and impressed me. Well, about a year or so later, Dad had to call the ambulance and the fire department again. You see, all 5 of us kids were outside playing. My oldest sister, Mary, she decided she wanted a snack, but instead of eating potato chips like a normal child, she decided to eat the mushrooms right out of the front yard. You can laugh, it's okay, we still make fun of her today. But as you can imagine, she became violently ill, and all of us kids thought she was going to die. Dad called the fire department, and I remember Mom distinctly calming us down by saying, "It's going to be okay. The fire department is here. They're going to take care of her. They're going to take her to the hospital. She'll be home in a couple of days." And sure enough, Mom was right as usual. The paramedics came and started IVs on her. They gave her some medicine and took her to the hospital. And sure enough, she came back home the next day, and she was just fine. That really left a huge impression on me, those 2 calls, those 2 days. But what most impressed me about the whole thing was that those firemen knew exactly what to do, and they never hesitated to do it. They just jumped right to action. I grew up thinking that's what I wanted to do, especially when I became a junior high and high school. I wanted to be the one that shows up to somebody's house and make everything better for them. And that became a prayer of mine. I began my firefighting career in 1991. I worked for the City of Gonzales Fire Department, and that's about an hour south of San Antonio. I was 20 years old. In 2002, my wife and I took our children fishing. While we were there, a thunderstorm came rolling in, and it was a lot of cloud-to-ground lightning. And so I looked at my wife and I told her, "We need to get the children out of here because something bad's going to happen." She agreed, and we took the kids to the truck, and I came back to go get the fishing gear. And I was there. I felt something inside of me tell me, "Paul, get down right now." And I did. Right as my knees hit the ground, there was this bright flash of light, the loudest crack of thunder I could have ever have heard, and everything just went silent, what seemed like an eternity. But eventually the silence was broken by the cries of a mother who was wanting someone to help her because her 12-year-old daughter was struck by lightning. Instinctively, I jumped up and ran to the screams, started performing CPR on the little girl. As I was coming up to her, what little clothes she had left on her body were still smoldering from the lightning. She had severe third-degree burns to her back from where she had been leaning up against the tree that was struck by lightning. The lightning exited through her feet, and the force of the lightning exiting through her feet literally blew her socks and shoes off of her feet. I'm performing CPR on this little girl, and it seemed like another eternity before the ambulance showed up. Unfortunately, the ambulance that showed up was a basic unit, which means they can only do CPR, they can only administer oxygen, and they can only bandage wounds. But as God would have it, I happened to be a paramedic supervisor at that very department for several years, although I was no longer working there. And I happened to know personally the crew that showed up. So it was really easy for me to just help them load the patient inside the ambulance, and we were able to start advanced cardiac life support measures on the little girl. Now, I have been a firefighter for almost a full 32 years of my life. And through those years, I've seen many amazing and strange things. But what happened on this call, by far, probably takes the cake on the most amazing things that I have seen. I've seen things to where we're working ambulances calls. Things would go textbook and patients would die still. And I've been on scenes to where whatever could go wrong did go wrong, but the patient turned out living. And because of that, I've always known that God was in charge. But that day, something else happened. I've never felt God's presence on a call like I did this particular day. As I'm doing CPR on this little girl, she suddenly started coming to life. She started pushing my hands and trying to push my hands off of her chest. She's trying to pull the intubation tube out of her mouth because it's keeping her from breathing. She feels like it's choking her. I've never felt that before, and I knew right away that God was present. God was present with me the whole time when He was there telling me to get my family to safety, yelling in my ear, "Get down right now," at the exact moment lightning struck. And He was there with me, kneeling down in front of the mother as I took her the little girl from her hands and started performing CPR on her. Of course, at that time, I had no idea what all this meant or where it would lead me. But I knew one thing. I was God's instrument, and only God decides who lives and dies. I'm happy to say that by the time I loaded the little girl into the helicopter to be transported to San Antonio burn units, she was able to sustain her own heartbeat, and she was trying to breathe on her own. But the biggest surprise came several months later when I received a phone call. She was coming home from the hospital, and she wanted to meet the paramedics and firefighters that saved her life. Fast forward to the year 2019, early 2020. At this time, I'm a captain paramedic supervisor with the Bel Air Fire Department, which is down in the Houston area. At this time, I've also been a firefighter approximately 29 years. I was already divorced, my annulment had already come through, and I had already been discerning the priesthood for 2 years. One day while on duty, I had another God moment. The ambulance crew on duty with me that day made a septic shock call, so they called me to the scene to help them out. The lady that was unconscious, unresponsive to painful stimuli, she had an extremely high temperature, she had an extremely high heart rate and a low blood pressure, and she had agonal respirations. As we're performing advanced cardiac life support measures on her, all of a sudden there's a knock on the back of the ambulance door. Thinking, of course, it's a firefighter, one of my crew members, or a police officer or family member, we open the door. But when you know it was a Catholic priest. He looks at me and he says, "Captain, I know y'all are really busy right now and you need to take this lady to the hospital, but I'm a Catholic priest and she's my parishioner. Will you allow me to come up into the ambulance and anoint her before you leave? The look on my face must have been very shocking to him because I looked at him like he was stupid. I was like, absolutely. Your work is far more important than mine. Later that evening, as we're sitting around the dinner table at the station, we're talking about that particular call. And at that time, my battalion chief was not very happy with me for allowing somebody into the back of the ambulance. And I understand his position on this. That's not a very good practice all the time. But what upset me the most was that he's Catholic, and he just didn't get it. So as he was scolding me, I looked up, I sat up at the table, and I said, "Excuse me, Chief, you're absolutely wrong." I said, "We might be able to save a life, but a Catholic priest has the authority from God to save a soul from hell." They say hindsight's 20/20, and indeed it is. As I look back at my career, especially at those two calls that happened approximately 20 years apart from each other, I can see exactly how the Holy Spirit had been forming me to become a priest through my career as a firefighter paramedic. Early in my career, God drove home the point to me that I'm merely His instrument. And over the next several years, He has allowed me to experience the fulfillment of surrendering to His will. And then, towards the end of my career, God not only sent a Catholic priest to anoint a woman who was on her deathbed, but that same Catholic priest helped me to realize that God was truly calling me to become a priest. More importantly, I was ready to give up my career for it. You see, prior to this call, I had already been denied by 2 different dioceses in Texas, and I was really struggling. Is this God's will for me? Or is this something that I want? But that call really answered my questions. As a boy growing up, like I said, my prayer was, "Lord, make me that firefighter who shows up to make everything better." But now as a deacon who is quickly approaching his priestly ordination, my prayer to God is, "Lord, make me that priest who knocks on the back of an ambulance door to save a soul from hell." My story and path to the priesthood is just one of many here at Pope St. John XXIII National Seminary. God has formed me and all of my seminarian brothers through our previous careers and life experiences. And He brought all of us here to this seminary because this institution understands and embraces all of our previous life experiences and formation. They understand that we learn, think, act, and respond in ways that a 26-year-old just is not capable of doing because they just don't have the same life experiences as we do. So on behalf of all my seminarian brothers, from the very bottom of my heart, thank you all for your financial support. Thank you all for your loving encouragement. And most of all, thank you all for your heartfelt prayers. Thank you.